how many therapists would be like, well, let go of that and this and that. It's like, it's really easily said than done to say, hey, shift the way you think.
Yeah.
If I could do that, you think I wouldn't have done that already?
Yeah.
Going. A spiritual chiropractor.
My friends call me the real life Care Bear.
Talk it out. Welcome to episode number 16.
We're 16.
Black Sheep Thinking. I am Morgan Pierce.
And I am Andrew Potvin.
We are happy today to talk about the weakness of psychology.
Psychology, or as we'd like to call it, suckology.
So I'm going to give a trigger warning because a lot of people
Yeah.
are really invested in this because that's Freud kind of snuck into our culture here in North America. And we've really, really focused on trying to change the programming of our minds.
Yeah.
And so early on, the story for me, when I was in a dark spot, I actually decided I was going to take my life. And I went to my doctors and said, I'd like to see my doctor today. And they said, do you have an appointment? I said, no. And I didn't say it like that. I said, no, I don't. And they said, well, why are you here? And in a room full of people, I said, because I'm planning on taking my life in a few weeks. And I wanted to talk to someone first. And they said, can you please write down a Post-it note? She's very busy and will call you. And they never called. And then my wife having connections to the hospital foundation got me connected to a therapist, and they went in and I was very much against medication because if I took a pill and it changes me, well, then who am I? And that for me wasn't the right solution. The same guy, I didn't take any ADHD medication for that either. And that worked out fine. And I'm not trashing people that are in that situation and make that choice. But for me, I just didn't feel it was right. And it really pushed it. And that was kind of their option. And I said, I don't want to do that. You've been informed of that. And the therapist said, the psychologist actually said, do you know how like one CEO is being fired and they hire two with no benefits for less money? And I said, yeah. They said, that's the way of the world. You're not going to change it. And I said, well, let's see if I can. And I had an understanding that from an article that in the concept of depression, it's people feeling controlled, and we don't have anxiety. We experience it. We don't get depressed. We get stuck. And medicating this for me was like Spider-Man going in and say, every time something bad happens, I get a tingling sensation. And they say, well, here, take a pill. That will go away. That takes away some of our gifts of being human.
Yeah. And
there's a lot that I see with a psych degree. I look at it. We know that, for example, in the DSM-V, it's a bunch of different, I would say descriptions, but they're more like labels.
Yep.
And the labeling theory is if you label someone that way, they become that.
Yep.
And many of us can be in a situation where we represent that description at any given time, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. We think because we're diagnosed, we have an illness, we are not broken.
Yeah.
And so psychology for us has been one of obviously our biggest adversary, but I ask all the time, if psychology works, why are we the most medicated society of all time and the most suicidal?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was like, I got heavy into the idea of the law of attraction. And the idea is your thoughts create things, create your life. You can create from your thoughts and from thinking. And at that point in time, I went through a pretty rough time and I had some really terrible thoughts. And that scared the shit out of me because I was like, I can't stop thinking catastrophically. And so I'm destroying my life with my thinking. And so all of this is going wrong because I'm thinking about it. And so it's my fault and I'm creating all of this stuff. And it was like, there was no way out until I understood that I'm not my thinking. And that thinking occurs. It just occurs. We can't stop thinking. We can settle it when we lean into the truth of who we are, when we see that we're something beyond our thinking. But that fear of creating my life with my thinking it terrified me because
because people are negative thinkers, not because they're negative.
Yeah.
Because your brain works that way.
Yeah.
And we know the average person has 12 to 80,000 thoughts per day randomly. And apparently 80% of those are negative. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're negative. That's your brain's job as a risk manager. But it used to be like, don't hug a bear and be careful of what you eat in the wilderness. Now it's like, don't get canceled and, don't make anyone angry. Don't lose your job.
And I think what we're seeing right now is like that whole psychology mindset of like, we're like computers, and we just have to hack our brains. And if we hack our brains, then we'll be able to hack the system of our psychology. And it's like, we are not our brains.
Right.
We're not our brains. Our brains are a tool that we can use, but that's not what we are. We are something much more innate than that.
Yes. And when we tap into that, then the brains are useful. Like we've said before, building IKEA furniture or, doing math or whatever. But the real truth of who you are is best for seeing yourself in relationships from a place of purity. We know that's the operating system, and that the brain can then chill and be an interpreter rather than trying to run the whole program.
Yeah.
I mean, even studies show that, like, for example, if you're in line, like say Canada's Wonderland for a fun ride, and you're in line waiting, you're super hyped, happy, and then you get on ride, you're really happy, and then as soon as you leave and you're on your way home, it drops by 50% in happiness in its kind of standby mode.
Yeah.
And it becomes very much, and that's why people struggle to hold on to happiness, because they think they need to think their way through happiness. And as Viktor Frankl said, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because people will go to therapy and they feel slightly better. And sometimes that works for people. And we know the positive thinking is better than negative thinking.
Yep.
But we also know that it doesn't stick for the majority of people, that often people come to us after years of therapy and say it's not working. And so I find it really interesting how, dogmatic and focused. I know that there's a lot of therapists that are doing their best to help, but I think they're stuck in their programmed,
in the world of
regulated, regulated focus to be. And if all you have is a hammer, every problem has to be a nail. And then people aren't getting what they want. And people will say, like, I go and, they just reflect back, and every time they go in the past, they reopen Pandora's box and they re-listen to that, because your brain doesn't know the difference between an actual problem that you're experiencing in the moment and one that you dealt with in the past, and you relive that emotion. And then, as Dr.
Joe Dispenza.
Thank you. As Joe Dispenza says, like, all your emotions are a chemical residue of a past experience.
Yeah.
And that you can work through emotions. We're not against emotions.
Yeah.
But to avoid them becoming your personality.
Yeah.
What are the other options? Well, the option is to find a place inside of you that's the operating system that knows no judgment and purity. And the same way we look at children or animals, the love that we know is pure to us, and learn to come from that place in yourself and others. And psychology doesn't allow for that space.
Yeah, it really doesn't, because it's just a battle. It really, there's no winning, because, like we say, no matter what you do, negative thinking is going to occur, because your brain is a computer.
Right.
It's running systems, and it's got different ways that it fires. And if you're in a healthy place where you've been giving it the nutrients that it needs, and it's going to work differently. And so to identify with that and think that what's occurring in your brain is who you are, that you're a robot that can just be hacked and programmed, is it's a really dangerous game to play.
We always go back to, like, if you were on a vacation. I always say, you ever say you need a vacation for your vacation?
Yeah.
And I go, yeah. I say, well, why does that occur? Well, because your brain did this. You had to be attentive to and bring awareness. And situational awareness in an emergency situation goes from 1 to 10. 10 is very high. You can do that for a while, but in movies, if you're like to see the people that are in a Die Hard kind of situation where they have to be intense, it's exhausting. It's like when you go on vacation, you're like, okay, where do we put our luggage? What door is it at? When do we get here? Where do we eat? When does the flight, all this stuff. And I don't want to miss anything. And then I get there, and then where's our room? And then you're resting for 8 days, you get back, and they do nothing on vacation. They come back, they go, how was your vacation? I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Well, but that's because your mind was idling at such a high level that we know that it takes as much energy over a weekend tournament for chess players at the highest level who are concentrating as it does for an athlete during a sports event to burn calories in that game. It's like a very intense amount of calories. If you put that kind of pressure on another organ like your heart, that amount of time, you might have a heart attack, and you can't control your heart. You can maybe influence it by resting and all that, but you can't control it and make it beat like bump, 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 or you're like a millionaire.
Yeah, and I think that's a mistake that people are trying to make with their brain, is they think they can control that thinking. And and it's just, like you say, it's
when Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it, we just kind of looked at that and said, well, there's an answer to say you can't, fix your brain with your brain.
Yeah.
You can't use the answer to thinking isn't more thinking. That's like, I'm choking on food, and someone goes, well, here, eat more food. you use something different like water and so as choking, it's funny is how people really want to will against what it's supposed to do, and then get frustrated when they're not successful at it, and they lose hope. And that's why people are like, well, therapists are helping and you need a relationship with therapists. It's like, well, if you're not going in and understanding a tool that allows you to sustain that, like I'm going to go to a personal trainer and work out with them for 2 to 3 months, But after that, if I can't work on my own, then they weren't teaching me, they were soaking me.
Yeah.
And that's why we've had people come in and go, can I renew with you? And you're like, you might not have to.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to give you the tool that allows you to manage yourself in a way that's effortless rather than strategies.
Yeah.
And so I was at a talk one time and I was talking about how anxiety is, I don't know if we ever talked about anxiety. We should, on its own.
Yeah,
but we will, yeah. And you'll hear this again, is that you don't have anxiety. It's not like herpes. You don't catch the anxiety.
Who gave you anxiety?
Yeah, who did you kiss? Yeah. Yeah. Anxiety is an STD. So, and when you look at it from a perspective of you experience anxiety through your thinking and what it means, and we can talk about that another time, that I was talking about how that it goes away when you go through this understanding. And I had a guy at Online University raise his hand and say, you talked about there's no such thing as anxiety, but I have anxiety and I do this. Is this the wrong way? And we would never say it's wrong. I just asked a simple question. I said, does it work for you permanently? And he said, no, I end up experiencing anxiety a day or two later. I'm like, then you found a coping strategy.
Yeah.
And if we can know the difference between things that lead us down to a coping strategy versus a solution, why do people just stop at a coping strategy when we have a solution available to them that's different, but people want to hold on? And the issue is that if people recognize that the Freudian concept where Freud believed, everything that happens to you is what you become and that you are your experience. Well, that doesn't hold weight because people couldn't change. Yeah. And we see it all the time. And also we would all experience the same thing from a situation, have the same impact. That's not true either. It goes back to our interpretation of our reality based off of who we are. When we let go of that, it lets things to move on and grow and people shift. Yeah. Versus, I have to, because CBT works for some people in a situation, but does it work permanently? And for some, like I said, I'm not saying it never works, but it works so little that people
the consistency is
they're not being cured. Yeah. And every book out there says think differently. Everything we used to think books like, Gary John Bishop's on F Yourself was a great book, but then we realized it was just a battle. And I asked people after they read it, they go, oh, it was a great book. And then 3 months later, how you feeling? Yeah, back where I was. Yeah. But meanwhile, when we spend time with people and help them understand this, they'll come back 3, 6, a year later and say, man, this is sticking. It's changed my life. And it's like, well, yeah, that's because you're not trying to go against something that won't stick because because
it is what you are. It's what you are and you take it with you everywhere and you don't have to fight against it. And you don't have to change it. You just have to become it.
Right. You take the solution with you within, and again, your brain's going to interpret things based off of your experiences and all that. That's fine. But when you see that you're seeing life as you are and not as it is, and you're trying to go against that, it doesn't bode well for a lot of people to try to will their brain into, convincing their identity. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you've seen a therapist and you feel it's working for you and you think we're just trashing therapy, there are therapists, like we say, there are therapists out there that are meaning well. It's the idea of psychology that's the problem.
Yeah, not the therapist. The psychologist.
Yeah, we're not trashing therapists. We're
they're trying to help people.
Psychology is the challenge.
Yeah, we don't think they're bad humans doing a bad thing, and we're not trying to bring them down to raise ourselves up. We're just looking at it from a perspective of a man who, we've read a ton of books on it. We've educated ourselves. I've gone to school on it. We just started seeing it as like, why aren't we questioning why it's not working? I remember when I was a kid, I never saw an 8-year-old commit suicide. We're seeing a lot of young kids do that. Yeah. We understand what the problem is. We just don't think the solution's in the same place. Yeah. We look at Instagram, they call it instant anxiety. How many pictures does it take to stress out? One. Yeah. I'm not that rich. I'm not traveling. I'm not that good looking. And we start going into our minds. What would a psychologist, how many therapists would be like, well, let go of that and this and that. It's like, it's really easily said than done to say, hey, shift the way you think. Yeah. If I could do that, you think I wouldn't have done that already? Yeah. Going and you can try. And again, it will feel good for a while. I'm really happy that people are looking for something, but when they recognize that that there is an alternative, and this alternative is knowing the difference between what you think you are, your thinking, and what you are. Yeah.
And we've had people say that to us, right? Like, well, Morgan, Andrew, I can't just change my thinking, because that's how they hear it with what we're trying to explain to them. Well, I can't just change my thinking. And we're like, yeah.
We agree.
Yeah. We know. We know that you can't change your thinking. We're not inspiring you to try and change your thinking. We're trying to help you understand that you could think from somewhere different.
Yeah. And so it's interesting when people are so holding. I don't mind when people want to try things. We actually encourage people to go and see how it works for them. But we get them come back and they go, I saw a therapist and they just reflect and listen. I'm not getting any action steps. I'm like, well, what are you looking for? And it's like they're looking for advice. And I'm like, well, we don't want to tell you what to do. We want to tell you where to do it from. And then you'll know what to do.
Yeah.
You are the answer to this situation.
Yeah.
And knowing how to soften and realizing that most problems are imagined. If you were going to go down the path, we like, out of all the therapists, or psychologists, we love Adler. We think Adler connected the brain and spirituality in a really cool way to see beyond that but he says some really crazy stuff. There's no such thing as trauma, which we understand that part of it, which I think you should read. And that all conflicts and interpersonal relationships that are problems are imagined.
Yeah.
That they're based off of what we think we are. And it supports and speaks to what we're teaching, and that we can guide you to a feeling that allows you to shift permanently, because your brain is doing the job it's supposed to do. And for you to continually because we say you can be positive, but if the acronym that was given, I think Kern Ray covered a long time ago, was like HALT with an E. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or you feel exposed to the environment, you will automatically become negative.
Yep.
Because your brain's going to go back into the automatic programming, and it's so much effort, like I said, in situational awareness, to try to keep it at a positive level. And then you don't do it. And you think, oh, I'm a bad person and I'm not being positive.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's not about you. That's not you.
You're a human being with a brain that functions the way it's meant to function. Congratulations.
You remember the story of two wolves?
Yes.
Yeah. That it's such a simple understanding, because the story sounds really great, but I think people push things that are working into their psychology.
Yeah.
Like they could push love into their psychology, or gratitude into their psychology. And then that becomes, I have a great car and a nice home, rather than experience themselves add gratitude.
Yeah.
And the story of two wolves, which we know, the one of light
wolf and the dark wolf.
Yep. And then the light is all the good emotions, happy, all that stuff, charity, kindness, whatever they said back then. And then the dark was like greed, anger, frustration. And then they battle and they psych up the kids, like, so which one wins? And they say the one you feed, and people go, oh, I want to be the white wolf. And it's like, both of those things occur in your brain. The real person who you are is the feeder.
Yeah. You're not the wolves, you're the feeder.
Right. So instead of feeding the wolves, why would you think you're one of those? Just stop feeding, period, and become that watcher, and understand that the best way to manage your psychology is to let thoughts occur, and then cherry pick your experience and prioritize what you want your experience to be, and not, that's not being positive. It's just showing up and letting thoughts occur the way they're supposed to. Your brain's doing its job by thinking.
Yeah. And your experience will become more positive, because you're not trying to will it so much. You're just choosing the experience you want to have, and you're enjoying it while you're in the process of experiencing it.
Yeah, psychology is the whole concept of therapy, for the most part, is like a coping strategy. And sometimes that can be enough for someone. Like I said, if someone cuts himself, then a coping strategy is a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to achieve something greater, or you're in a bad place, a Band-Aid's not enough for a gushing wound.
No.
And I think that, how many Band-Aids are you going to put on it? And it's like, oh, you come see me once a week, and then, here's a little bit of, and I feel a little bit better. And that's one of the reasons we've talked about in the past, is like in the episode, The Search, what have you tried and it hasn't worked?
Yeah.
And so why, what's preventing you from understanding something different? Well, I had a guy call me, he said, man, I've read every book you've read. Why would I work with you? And I was like, well, you probably have, maybe even more. Because he was really into this self-help psychology stuff. And I said, he's like, I've looked under every rock. I'm like, you've looked under the same rock from every angle. This is a different rock.
Yeah.
And we're not the only person in the world talking about it. We're the only person talking about it with such focus and understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know many other people globally that are speaking of this type of conversations on a regular basis, which is why our podcast is very unique. When you search who else,
there's nothing else
like this.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's not to toot our horns. Again, if you listen to Andrew McKee's, if you listen to other people that like Dr. Joe Dispenza, thank you. I was like, Dr. Joe Pez Candy?
Pez dispenser.
And he's amazing. And
he is amazing.
But again, a lot of them are talking around it. And a lot of them are, they're so, and it's like, so that's why, one of our episodes we'll talk about, when we talked about how to read and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We did. But the thing is like, how do we help people understand that your thinking is really the reason why you're suffering? So if we know you're not, and people will say to us when we say, are you on board with knowing you are not your thinking?
Yeah.
And they'll go, yeah. I'm like, what do you think that means then?
Yeah.
If you are not your thinking, if that's not what you are, then what are you? We talk about that, but then why do you go back to the thing that you're not so much?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what, I mean, we've really made it our mission is to help people understand that when they say, yeah, usually they don't have a concept of what they are beyond their thinking. And so what our job is to do is to help you understand what that is, what you are without your thinking. And once you understand it, once you see it, and it becomes really clear to you, then that's when things start to shift. And like
I'd even go further than say understand it. Once they experience.
Yeah.
Because this is the hard part is like, this is not something that we necessarily teach. We guide you to that experience because once you wake up in that, you'll feel the difference between your thinking. Yeah. And if you are suffering at any time, if you're not experiencing life you want, we know you're in your thinking. Yeah. But if you're experiencing lightness, like we talked about, when you see your child, when you see your pet, when you have an experience of giving of to somebody that you're not used to giving to, of a service, when you have the experience of true gratitude, many different times in life. When I was working with a man just today who said when he connected with his family, who he'd never experienced before, for the first time, he knew what it was like to be part of love. And I saw him touch his chest and he got emotional. I said, what happened there? He said, I just never experienced that before. I'm like, where did you touch? And he said, my heart. And we know it's not the heart scientifically. We know that there is no reason to experience anything there and that people get their hearts replaced and they still feel it. And we know it's not the brain, that he's pointing to something more. And if you could live from that place and let yourself speak from that place and let yourself communicate, that life unfolds differently for our clients. And so that whole concept of psychology, and that's the problem. We go in the world and it's all psychology. Everywhere. Everything. It's everywhere. It's in every meme. It's on all, and how many times we flick through TikTok. And get frustrated and share with each other. Look what this guy's saying. It's misleading people to a place of false hope. That's devastating for people because it will make them feel good. A little dopamine hit. It'll make them, like, for example, the kind of things that were like, you know what, you gotta, if people are gonna, what's that one about?
Oh, people treat you like an option, leave them like a choice.
Yeah, where does that serve them to judge people? If people are going to be in a spot, you just need to fight fire with fire and burn out and then wonder why they feel alone or abandoned or rejected or create problems in the relationship. There's other options available to you that will still serve you in creating and not leave you vulnerable, wounded, or taken advantage of, but allow you to ease through life. And it's not in the judgmental mind because the mind, we know there's two types of experiences we've been taught. The first experience is of psychology. It's that of the mind. And that's where fear and judgment and validation and other things like that live when you're in your physicality. We also know there's a side that's enlightenment. And enlightenment is a place of understanding and love and truth and joy and service and gratitude and so forth.
And the only way to live in that, like you said, in enlightenment is to experience it. You have to experience it as a feeling and show up in that. It's like our Reiki instructor said to us, right? You can try and explain the taste of coffee and get an understanding for the taste of coffee, but the only way you'll ever know what coffee really tastes like is to experience it.
Right. And because psychology wants you to think more about it, it puts you in a battle within yourself where we want you to ignore the thinking for the brain for a while and let it settle on its own and show up in this feeling and let life occur for you. Instead of trying to live your life, let life live you and show up with this aliveness, with discernment and understanding and watch how things unfold very differently in your experience.
Agreed. How are we looking?
Good. Well, I mean, I thought this was going to be a two-parter because we're like, boom, psychology. Again, why we get so frustrated is only because, and when with all our clients, a large percentage, a vast majority will experience a permanent shift. And then every so often we have people that will come back and visit us once every 6 months and have to be reset. Like, that's why I say we're the spiritual chiropractor. Because it's like reset them. And it doesn't take long because they go, because they get caught in psychology. Why wouldn't they? They read a popular book. They heard something and they started experiencing again and they started getting back into.
And our stance on psychology is probably the place we get the most hate.
Yes.
It's probably the place we get the most hate. And if we didn't really know that what we are teaching is the most efficient answer to help you live a happy and fulfilled life, we wouldn't take the stance we do, and we wouldn't be able to stand strong in our understanding.
It's the most efficient. I know it's not the only way, but it's the most efficient that we found, and we're constantly on a search. And what's more efficient than showing up in the concept of truth
and in authenticity and in love and understanding and kindness
and then feeling lighter and approaching life with discernment and awareness rather than from a place of trying to battle your strategic thinking of I need to, and then seeing yourself as not enough. And that all exists in the physicality, and we think it's wrong, but it's just what the human condition is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you have a therapist you love and it's working, yay, we're happy for you.
Absolutely.
But if you're not, recognize that you don't have to keep using the same tool and expecting different results, that there's another opportunity for you to experience something different. And that's why we are black sheep thinking and not white sheep.
Exactly. That's exactly why we're doing what we're doing.
Happiness does think differently. It thinks from a different place.
Yeah.
And this place has made a difference in our lives and many others. And if it resonates with you, that's great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. We just hope you find happiness in your way. And we just are very blessed and lucky to know that we've found something that works for many people, and we hope it works for you. And if it doesn't, if it doesn't resonate with you, just know that we love you too. And we appreciate that you've taken time to listen to us, because we only want to introduce it to people. We don't want to force it on anybody.
Yep. It's just an opportunity to see something different. So
it's a therapist's job.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, much love to those out there that are trying to make a difference. We appreciate this, and we hope one day. Oh, I have one more story to tell about that and how we came. This is important.
Yeah,
I should have started with this, actually. So this all came to an occurrence for me when I was first starting Black Sheep Thinking, and we were trying to find a way. And I was about perspective changing, but seeing it wasn't working. And I had a woman call me, and she said at Queen's University, there was a talk by therapists that was about PTSD and suicide. And they were doing a longitudinal study that was like 20, 30 years where they're gathering all the data for indicators of suicide.
Okay.
And so she said, I saved you a seat at the front. And I went in, and they came up and they spoke, and I'll say it in a much more simplified version, but they basically said after 30 years of research that they had no friggin' idea. There was no indicators for suicide. It didn't matter what color you were, what income. There was no predictors. They didn't know anything about it, and they didn't know how to help people. And they started looking more towards our field because we were having more success on the outside than inside. And this is all their words. And they started looking at Maslow, what I would call our version early on of a more modern approach to Maslow's. So rather than safety and security, it was about money, financial security and well-being. And then it became about relationships and purpose and whatnot. And it looked very similar. And I kind of looked over like, oh, I guess we're already doing this kind of thing. It's neat because I never feel insulted if I created something that was from a smart person. Yeah. Because I'm like, oh, cool, we're on the right page. And then someone raised their hand and said, have you ever done any studies on spirituality and how that's helping people heal? And of course, in an academic situation, it's not measurable. So they're like, and they panicked. But that question resonated with me for a sec. And at the same time, I just happened to be, when I went to MKP, which is Mankind Project. Yeah. I do a great job in helping men heal on a weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I experienced some of what they did there. And I knew it made me feel better. Yeah. But I didn't know what it was. Yeah. And then when Andrew McKee came into my life and brought this understanding, I started to piece it together. Spirituality that he said he saw people heal. I experienced spirituality at NKP and the indigenous roots of what they do. Yeah. And then I was talking with Andrew McKee about spirituality. There's something about what this is, that's making me feel better permanently. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized, wow, all this education, self-help, all the things I did with psychology, all the things I look for in changing my perspective wasn't working, as it hasn't for many. Yeah. Maybe that this is something worth investing in. And that was the moment for me.
It's funny. I know the story of all the shifts that have occurred and the MKP. I don't know if I've heard that one about the talk at Queens. Man.
Yeah,
I've heard so many stories, and I'm like, I'm like hanging on every word. I'm like, I don't think I've heard. Holy crap! There's a story I haven't heard.
Yeah, and that's the last one. We're done. This podcast is over for you, anyways. Anyways, I hope that gives you some insight in the experience of why we recognized and we're not, why we understand that psychology needs to start being questioned about its effectiveness. Because yes, if that's the best we have, great. It's better than nothing. But we have another option now that we're not talking about, and we're starting to talk about it, and you're here to witness it. And
absolutely.
If you have any questions, please ask us, because we love you're here. Yep. It means you're curious, and we appreciate you. And we'll take any comments you have, and please reach out and let us know if we can say and have a conversation about anything that would be a bigger impact and more direct in helping where you're at.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're on our podcast, make sure you are subscribed to our channel, because that's the best way you're going to get more of us and more of our podcasts.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Much love.
Thanks. Bye.